I'm Jamie Mayfield, and thank you for joining me on SockTV. We are going to make flat fabric today. Now, there's lots of different ways you can do it, okay? You can make flat fabric that is X number of needles wide, okay? You can make flat fabric that is all the needles wide, okay? So first I'm going to show you how to make all the needles wide flat fabric. Are you confused yet? Let me show you. Okay, so we've cast on and we're going around. Let me make sure. I heard a funny noise, I thought. Yeah, see, I keep hearing that noise and that means I have a bad latch. So I want to change that out. You want to show this up close? All I'm doing is taking this needle out. The stitch is still on the needle. Now I'm going to locate another needle. Let me look in my filing cabinet here. I don't see one. Boy, howdy. Let's see. I had a whole pile of them. Here's one. Get a new needle. Set that one down in the cylinder and just transfer that stitch over. Now this one, I kind of messed it up a while ago when I was smarting around. I made it. Okay, now I don't hear that funny noise anymore. It reminds me to remind you, always check and make sure and then double check. Aunt Sis, she can't make this program play on her iPad, so it's okay. She'll start a sock and she'll have one stitch on 2 needles 9 times out of the 10. Because she doesn't always pay attention because she's always busy talking to us. And we have a lot to talk about. But you have to pay attention and make sure that all your needles are knitting. So in order to knit flat fabric, we are going to pick a spot up here. And I'm just going to visually pick this spot right up here. This is going to be, I'm going to raise the needles right here. Now, let me show you. I'm going to raise these needles. Now I have to raise them. It would be so much easier if I found my crescent. I'm going to raise the crescent plus about 4 needles. Okay? I'm raising the width of the crescent, and then I'm going to raise about 4 more needles. Then I'm going to crank on around until I know that I can crank backwards. That's until you hear that last little click. Now I'm going to cut my my waste yarn, and I'm going to put in some project yarn. Let's see, what do we want to make a flat piece of something out of today? How about this lovely Lana Grossa neon? I love this stuff. Okay, so now I'm going to bring my yarn carrier back around to where the hole is in between the first working needle and the first needle that I raised up. Okay, now I'm going to change over and put that tail right down in there, just right with it, okay? And watch as I crank back around. Now, it didn't knit on that first needle, and it's not in a good place for you guys to see it. So we'll work, you know that when it doesn't knit, you just flip the stitch that's on the needle right over the top, and now it has knitted. Now I'm going to come back around, and you'll notice since I'm going backwards, my yarn is a little floppy. So I am going to install the heel spring for this operation. Now I'm going to stop at about the 6 o'clock position, and I'm going to raise these needles plus about 4, the width of the crescent plus about 4, but I could only get 2 because I stopped too soon. And I'm going to lower these needles. Now, who can tell me, Ron, when I lower these needles, what do I have to check? Ron? Yeah, he's not even paying attention. I have to check and make sure that, well, have you ever seen a hole like that? Hello? This camera, it's right here. Right here. Other side. This camera. Oh, can you raise it up just a hair? Ta-da! Look at that, Ron. Now you're usually all over that like flies on manure. Big mistake. Well, I sure didn't count on that today. So, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to continue knitting over here to where I can get and go back the other direction, because if I kept knitting this way, I'd be knitting backwards. Now, I wasn't watching, so I don't know why all those stitches dropped. So what I'm going to have to do is pick a stitch or two, and I'm going to hang some of these drop stitches back up on the needles. Okay. This is not a do-over type of mistake. Okay, and that's enough. I can get through, I can recover from that. So what I want to do is I'm going to clip my project yarn because I don't want to waste it, and I'm going to go back to waste yarn. I get it down here in my filing cabinet. All right, I'm going to put that yarn carrier back in the hole in between, and I'm going to thread the yarn through. However I can get it through, it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to knit. First of all, I'm going to make sure those latches are open, and I'm going to put all these needles back into position. And since I'm disgusted, since I made such a mistake, let's go ahead and make some more big mistakes. Well, that was just a little too easy. You see that hole? Okay, we can't start again until we have completely recovered from that hole and we have a good pull down in that area. So I need to do a few more rows. All those stitches just caught and magically started knitting again. So let's try this project again. Today we're going to make flat fabric. All right, so I'm going to crank around. I'm going to raise the width of the crescent plus 4 needles. Crank around till I hear the last little click, or if you're on a closed cam machine like I am today, until I know I can go backwards. Now this isn't hard. And I want you to know mistakes do happen to me every single day. They just don't. What? Does the lighting look better? I think it's the tan, Ron. It's the tan from the beach. It's not even spray on. Or it's not a fake bake either. Okay. Project yarn. I'm going to, this time I'll hold it up. That's okay. We just did this part. This isn't where the failure occurred. I'm going to lower these needles. Crank back over here until I can raise the width of my crescent plus about 4 needles. Okay, you can get away with the width of your crescent, but I raise those extra 4 just to be on the safe side. And at first, doing flat fabric with all the needles is kind of like wearing your underwear backwards. It's a little bit uncomfortable, but you get a rhythm and you don't really notice they're backwards after a while. So if I come back around, now I notice that my yarn is floppy. See how floppy it is? So I do want to engage the heel spring because I am going back and forth. Okay, so I'm going to come back around. I'm going to make sure that that first needle catches and knits. Then I'm going to stop here right before I get to these needles, and I'm going to lower them. Still doing it 2 at a time after all these years. I've already lost my crescent. And I'm going to raise these needles on this side. Okay, and you don't have to make sure that they're open. Okay. Now, I forgot to tell you that before you do this, you might want to reset your counter. And I've gone 2 rows. Okay, now, I didn't go back far enough that time and they don't want to knit. So I have to make sure that I go back far enough, and just when I'm about to get to these needles, but before that cam gets to them, I'm going to lower them so that they will knit, and I'm going to raise the needles on this side. Okay. Now I've got to go far enough to where I know I can crank the other direction. Get to almost those needles. See, I'm already developing my rhythm. Let's get a few more rows before I show you what to do in case you knit all the way around because you forgot you were making flat fabric. Gee, that never happened to me. Okay, I didn't go far enough again, and that one didn't want to knit, so I'm going to go a little further. Still doesn't want to knit. Go a little further. Well, that little turkey, he still doesn't want to knit. Now, if I wasn't paying attention, I would have dropped that stitch. Well, I did. I dropped both of them. So, before it runs, I'm just going to catch it. Then I'm going to make sure. Okay. I got to catch that one too, because I can't get the yarn into both of them. So I'm just going to put my pick through both stitches. Well, heck, I dropped that one too. Okay, now we're going to have to figure out why. See if I put it over in that one. Hang on, I'm concentrating. Stick with me, people. I know this has happened to you. Little sucker, there it goes. All right, now I'm going to hold those stitches. And once I get back around, I'm going to put this stitch back up on the thing, on the needle. Then I'm going to fix these stitches by flipping them over. Now this is all going to happen to you too when you try to make the flat fabric the first time. So you better pay attention to how I'm fixing this stuff so you don't have to start over every time. Okay? All right. Now we're going to get back over here. We're going to lower these needles. We're going to reposition ourselves. Now we're going to figure out why it doesn't want to knit that first stitch. Okay. I'm coming back around, and it knit that first stitch just fine this time. So we're going to go put these guys down. Locate the crescent, raise these guys up. Got to get my mojo. All right. Now we have to go back far enough. Now when I go back, this is, oh, I know what the problem is. Hang on, let me just stand up here and look. Ha! Here's the problem, we need oil. What's happening is when I'm coming back around, there's a cam right here on this machine that is getting stuck. Is my head in the way? And this is right at the spot. Huh? Oh, here we go. Oh, yeah. When I'm coming back around, no, that's this way. When I'm going, okay, let me move this rubber out of the way. Now you can see it. When I'm going back around, do you see how that cam right here, this cam, didn't go up on that driver? Now it'll knit just fine. Now, when that cam gets stuck, that tells me, I gotta make sure I see it here. We're gonna put this back down because we don't want to mess up our project. Now we're watching three things at once. I'm gonna raise these needles Okay, and that tells me that I need to put some oil on that little sucker right there. Now you notice that I try not to use oil a whole lot because I don't like it when it gets on my shirt. I don't know if you can see, but I have a little oil on my shirt today. Okay, and once I squirted that oil in that little hole, here's what I'm gonna do when we're going back the other direction. Well, here, I'll show you when we go back the other direction. Okay, now this cam, see, it traveled right up, just right like it was supposed to. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, this is the offensive cam, and you can feel now, I felt why it was getting stuck because there was no oil in there. And all I did was I squirted some oil in there. And then I'm going to raise it up and down, and now that won't happen, okay? Because I want that to be real nice and floppy. See, you learn something new every day on these machines, okay? So I'm coming back around, and I have to lower these needles. Lower these needles, then I'm going to raise these needles. Okay, come back around. Oh yeah, it caught just fine that time. You guys probably were watching on the other camera, weren't you? Come on back around just to where I get to almost to these needles. Okay, then I'm going to raise these up. And I'm going to make a mistake on purpose. Now, it is occurring to me that you guys could see this better if I did this at a different spot on the machine. Okay? And I probably didn't think that through because I do know that this is my blind spot. Watch this. I didn't raise this first needle, okay? And it knit. So all I'm going to do is pull straight up on that needle, unknit it, and raise it, okay? Did you see that? We're going to do this whole thing one more time on the other side of the machine where you guys can see it really well, because the mistakes that I'm showing you are easily avoidable and easily fixed if you're paying attention. Okay. Now I'm going to come back around. If I start back, whoops, you know what? There we went. I didn't pay attention. See, that little cam got stuck again. Ooh, that's a good spot. That's the cam I'm talking about. If you go to the wide shot, oh yeah, that's it. And it's still stuck. I want it to get all the way up there and come back around. Now, in no way is this machine broken, okay? In no way does it need to go back to the factory. All we have to do is make sure that that has a nice slick runway. Okay, coming back around. Now, I am going to put all of the needles down because we're going to start this project again at a place where you can see it better. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and crank all the way around. Maybe we wanted a project with a hole right there. Now you see, I kind of have to hold that hole down because remember we always have to recover, so I probably ought to stick a fork in it. Call it done. Okay, y'all don't have to laugh really. I'm just going to put a fork right there so that there's downward pressure. Okay, so let's pick this little spot right here. I'm going to pick that spot right there. Okay, now I am going to make a hole right here. This will be something to wear on Sunday because it's going to be holy. All right, I'm going to crank on past it. Then I'm going to come back around. I still have my my heel spring engaged. And I'm going to get to almost to where the needles are knitting, and I went a little too far. And that needle's not going to knit. Okay, so you might want to set up for showing this one. Yeah, show that one, because I have to show how we're going to fix that. But first I have to get all my needles down and raise all my needles over here. +4. Okay. Now you have to be sure when you raise the needles, the butts need to rest up against this cylinder spring. Okay. So this guy, he's raised. He's not going to be able to knit. So what's going to happen is I'm going to come on around, even though he hasn't knit. Now I'm going to lower him, and I'm going to knit him manually. So I want to put the stitch that is on the cylinder, lift that up over, and now it's knitted. Okay? Can't even tell. Now I have to crank far enough around to where I can go backwards and lower these needles. Raise these. And let's make a goodly sized hole. Then we'll do some more troubleshooting, okay? Come back around. Now, if you don't crank on far enough, then on the Speedster or on the Erlbacher Gerhardt, it will stop and it won't let you knit backwards until you have gone past the last little click, okay? So I'm going to lower these needles. Let's see. Uh-oh, this time we have 3 that won't go down. So, before I fix that, because I can't fix it until I get over there, and until you get your mojo doing this, whoops, another big hole. It's right up there at 12 o'clock where you can't see it. The yarn just jumped right out of that joint. Okay. So, not only do we have to fix where they didn't knit, we have to fix this big hole. Now, just so you know, I would not fix this, like spend time fixing all these drop stitches. I wanted to show you how to put those back down. I wanted to show you how to fix a drop stitch on this show, but not particularly 5 in a row. This part I will have to start over. This is an error that I cannot recover from. Okay. Now, I suspect the last thing I did was I-cord on this machine. So I am suspecting, let's go ahead and change over our yarn. Back to waste yarn. Find my mojo. Once again, I think it left. Ron, did you get my mojo? He doesn't know what it is. He wasn't paying attention. Okie dokie, let's see. Now we have a big old rotten mess over here. Okay? Remember, before we start our project again, we have to recover and we have to have even pull down all around the whole cylinder. And I'm cranking as fast as I can to get away from that big old mess. I'm going to crank quite a bit of waste yarn because I know that I'm just going to turn around and use it again. I don't mind cranking more waste yarn than what I need to recover from a big hole. Okay, let's try this the third time. They say it's a charm. So we've got our spot picked. We're going to use the same spot. I'm going to crank forward, clip our waste yarn. Now this time when we come back around, we're going to look at that and why it is doing it. My suspicion, since the needles missed knitting, is that the yarn carrier, this brass football looking thing, is not close enough to the needles. And as I get it right here in front of me, I can see it, although you guys can't. Let's see if there's a good spot for you to see it. Right there. Okay, you see how far that is? What we're looking at is the distance between these needles and the yarn carrier. It's a little far away. Sometimes moving these things just a hair, all I'm doing is loosening. I'm going to scoot it just a little bit in closer. Okay. All right, now I'm going to get to where I almost knit those needles, but not quite. Lower these needles. Which one shot? And we'll watch them knit. Okay, remember we changed yarn. My yarn got floppy on me. That's telling me I need to re-engage my heel spring. Okay, making sure that first needle knits. Now, are you going to that tight shot? I'm not real sure where it is because I was watching. Okay, I'm lowering these needles and making sure that the latches are open. And I have to raise these needles. Now let's watch not in slow-mo, well maybe in slow-mo if I can crank slow enough. Let's watch these needles knit and see if our yarn carrier is now in the right position. And I do believe that it is. See how it just fell in there, just perfect? Okay, so we get to where, no. See, this is, again, that mojo. We don't want to lower these down yet. Keep those back up. Come back around. Go back and forth, and it is redundant. Oh wait, we forgot to reset our counter, so I'm going to set it back to 0. And I've gone 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. You see how I can tell I've gone 4 rows? 1, 2, 3, 4 bars. Right there, that's how I count my rows. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm knitting this way, raising these needles. Now, it's worth it when you get kind of turned around doing this project. It's worth it to take a second and reorient yourself, because I do get turned around when I'm doing this kind of flat fabric quite often. And it's not something that I do every single day. Okay, we're going to come back around. Get our tails out of the way. Lower these needles. And I'm going to raise these. Now, once again, I'm going to purposefully forget to raise this one. I want to show you what, if I didn't get them all raised, if I need to unknit this one, all I have to do is grab the yarn and pull straight up and get that loop back on that cylinder and then raise it up. But now you can see if I come back around, I've got my yarn all messed around, so I have to get it right back in there where it goes. Just make sure I get it over that needle that I just raised and crank this row. Now, look here. You see that? That first stitch didn't knit because I didn't have the downward pressure properly applied. So all I have to do is lift this over, okay? And I'm going to lower these needles. Knit this row. Bring these needles back around, or bring this yarn carrier back over here. Raise these needles. Now I keep waiting to drop a stitch, and I think I'm going to do it right there because I want you guys, where do you want me to do it? Right here? Let me do it right here. I'm going to close this latch. That's because when I drop that stitch, I close the latch, it's going to drop the stitch. Uh-oh, now that one didn't. That's the one I dropped earlier that I thought I would, but you couldn't see it. Okay, so it came to a dead stop, and that's because the latch got stuck up in the hole of the yarn carrier. So I'm still going to force it to drop. And you see what happened, okay? Because the latch was closed. Now, when you want a stitch to run, it never does it? Okay, so I get my handy dandy stitch repair tool. I haven't had to do this in a while. And the first thing I'm going to do, okay, go down just a little bit. I'm going to put my pick right there. Okay, that means that that stitch cannot run any further than where I have my pick. Okay, so that's kind of my rescue. And sometimes if I drop 2 stitches in a row, I'll fix them, but I put my pick in one of them and while I catch the other one. But I like to hold it so that the stitch cannot run further than that. Now, this is a knit stitch, so I have to do it from the outside of the fabric. Now, as it gets up here higher, you'll be able to see how we're going to latch this up. Okay, this is why it's a good idea to have more than one pick, because I use my pick tool to either hold that latch open or put the next bar. So I push it past, the latch goes past the stitch that's on the tool, and I raise the bar up over like that. Okay? Get my latch tool open. And I do it until I reach the top. Pull that. You can't even tell. Remove that. Didn't even need it. That's kind of like my little rescue. Okay. Now reorient myself where I am in this knitting. Whoops. And I'm going to raise this. Now, let's say I forgot to raise this needle. No, let's do one closer so you can see it better. Let's say I forgot to raise that needle. See it? Let's keep going. And it just knit. So I will apply the same principle. All I'm going to do is I'm going to pull straight up, and then that stitch is no longer knit. All right, come back around and note that since I was pulling around on the yarn, all right, so this yarn had flipped on this side, okay, which would be the outside of the needle. We want to be sure and flip it over so it's behind the needle and make sure that it's going to knit. Now, yeah, there we go. If you're watching closely, you can see that these stitches are riding up for our hole. Where's a fork? Here's a fork. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to install a fork. You have to get it up inside there. Just bring a fork in so that there's just a little extra pull down right there. See? All right. Now I'm going to come around. Got my needles are lowered. Okay. Now I think I have my yarn carrier too close because that stitch, that latch, there we go. Open that latch. Get back up in there. Let's try this yarn carrier position and see if it works, okay? Oops, I gotta close the door. Just flip that yarn up in there. Actually, I'll let it drop. See if we can't get a little better run on it. Remember, I'm going to stab it to stop it from running any further than I can reach. I'm going to get the loop of the stitch in the hook, the loop of the latch, hook of the latch. Okay. This one's a little awkward for me because I'm doing it with my right hand and I'm left-handed. But I want you guys to be able to see as well as you can how to fix a drop stitch. Okay. Okay. Once again, we got to make sure that there we go. All right. So you practice before you start a project, okay? Practice going back and forth on your waste yarn. That's what you need to take home from this project today. But let's say we want a square of fabric. Okay? Well, that silly, that needle must, yeah, I think I've torn up that needle. I'm pretty sure I have. Try to get the latch out of the, no, now it's going good. So let's say you can make a big long piece of flat fabric. You could steam it out. It's beautiful. There's lots of different things you can do with it. Sue Vanesky has a book that shows you how you can turn that little flat piece of fabric into, well, it would have to be longer than the one we made, but you can turn it into a bunny rabbit. But let's say we want to make a flat piece of fabric that is 10 stitches wide. So what we're going to do is we're going to raise all but 10 needles. Now, where are you going to be able to see that the best? Let's do it right here. Right over here. Do what? Right here. Yep, you're in the right spot. Okay, so we're just going to raise up all these needles. We're going to cut that yarn, and darn filing cabinet, it's like a magnet. Everything just goes in the filing cabinet. Have you ever noticed that? So let's say it's going to be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Let's do 12 stitches wide. All right. Now our yarn carrier is free and clear back here because it's going underneath all these needles. So I can just cut this off. All right. And if I'm going to make something that's 12 stitches wide, I want to start with waste yarn. I'm going to knit that. I'm going to engage my heel spring. Okay. Now, if I were starting from scratch, and I'm just going to go back and forth. Okay. Now, when I do that, I'm going to have, actually, you know what, let's do? All right. Advanced CSMing. Are you ready? We're going to take these needles out of play. You're just fine. Stay right there. I'm going to take these needles out of play, and we are going to drop all these other stitches. Okay? Now, pay attention on how to do this, because I bet I come up with a project utilizing this. Okay, so remember we're going to drop all these stitches. I don't care if the latches are open or not, because I want my flat piece of fabric to just be that we're knitting. Okay, now if I'm only knitting 12 stitches, I don't need all that weight. In fact, there's one fork that's holding it down. Let's see if I can do that with one fork. All right. So now we have all these needles that are going to knit. So now we have to raise all our other needles up, or we have to remove them if we want to make a really long piece of flat fabric. Okay, once again, that same needle is being a pill. I'm going to raise all these needles. Now we have our flat fabric is cast on, but we don't have any yarn in our yarn carrier. So let's put some project yarn in there because we've got waste yarn. Let's just finish using up this stuff. All right. That in there, drop my tail down in. I'm going to leave a long tail because if I make a 12 by 12 piece of fabric, 12 rows by 12, whoops, I didn't put all my needles down, so you guys should be able to tell me what to do to fix that, right? Okay, raise that guy back up. He's not behaving. Now I'm going to re-engage the heel spring because we changed yarns. So I'm going to re-engage the heel spring. And all I have to do to knit this fabric is crank back and forth. Okay. That's 4. 5, 6, 7, 8. When I'm doing it, this is a good example. If I was going real fast, I would have dropped these 2 stitches because the yarn flipped over and they didn't want to knit. So what does that tell me? There's not enough downward pressure right there. So that means, hey woman, add some weight, move your heel fork, do something. There. I'll just give a little tug on the heel fork. And I should be able. Now I'm not going to lie to you. When I do something this narrow, I usually just use my fingers. Okay. Whoops. See, those didn't want to knit. And I don't usually do it in this position on the machine. I use it where I can reach with my fingers, and I usually just use my fingers as my downward pressure. Which if I go like that, then you guys can't see. Okay. So, let's figure out a different way. Fat heel fork. Boy, all these tools and gadgets, they're just so handy. There, ta-da! Once you get your mojo, you can just go to town with this flat fabric. And there's so many things you can do with it. Sure, I would have to bind off the edges. Now my heel fork was no longer effective. But let's say I was going to use this and make a bow for a sock, like a little decorative bow. No longer effective. Okay, so let's go back to waste yarn. Leave myself a sewing tail. I'm going to change back to waste yarn. Oops. Filing cabinet's like a magnet, I tell ya. Back and forth. Heel fork needs to be moved up. Heel fork just dropped those stitches. Do you see that? Look, right there. Which is good because we don't care because we're on waste yarn. And the heel fork let go. That would be why that happened. Totally the heel fork's fault, not mine. Right? I'm telling you, I can make flat fabric all day. All right, so let's remove it from the machine and see what we have. Now, we've got this little strip of fabric. Okay, we can sew it together. We can sew it together and leave it wadded up, gathered up right there. There, okay, gathered up right there, and you've got a little bow. Isn't that cute? So, you can leave it like this. You can steam it and block it and try to make it fat or lay flat, like the flat fabric that it is. Useful for so many projects. Okay, guys, I need to talk to you about something real quick, and I need to let you know that I'm in a little trouble with Ron. I'm supposed to be getting new SockTV watchers. And I need you guys to help me tell everybody about SockTV and what a great deal it is to learn lots of new things on the sock machine, or else just watch me mess up. That's okay too. If you like to see how I fix mistakes, that's a good reason to join. So if you would help me out and tell everybody about SockTV, I would really appreciate it. And if you have any suggestions on how I can get more people and reach more people so that they know about SockTV, that'd be great too. Thanks again. I'm Jamie Mayfield.